Alrighty, y'all. Hello and welcome everyone to what episode are we on, Sarenth?
43.
43. Our guest David will be with us in a few minutes. He let us know ahead of time that he was running a few minutes late. Um, um, but that's all right. As per normal, we're running slightly behind ourselves, so gives us a little extra time to get set up.
Not a problem. Um, Again, looking forward to having David on. Like I said last episode, thank you for cleansing us within and without, and thank you for the fires between our computers. Thank you for the blessings. Thank you for the cleansings. Thank you, oldest ancestor, Mikkel Eldervater, for burning bright, for lighting our sacred fires, for lighting our camping gear, our stoves. Thank you for lighting the pilot lights in our homes. Thank you for the warmth that permeates our homes, our bodies, from in to out, from sunlight to the deepest beats of our heart. Hail, eldest ancestor. Still hail. So, yay! Glad to see your skin. Um, as I said, David is a guest that I was really excited to have on, and I'm actually really excited he decided to come on the show. Having him on around Grandfather Fire was a treat and a blessing. So I'm really looking forward to him coming on the show. Aside from that, what have you been up to since our last episode?
Fuck. A lot. uh, Sorry, I am full on in time blindness. Did I talk about getting married last time?
I don't recall.
No. I'm getting told no. Um, yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. Because we talked about
Oh, yeah, that's right, because we talked about theology and application.
yeah. But yeah. So not since last time, but getting settled in being married that takes time. It's fine. Getting settled in at the new job still. Actually just passed my 30 days last week at the new job. It's going really well. It's a lot of work because I'm learning basically an entire new area of science. Like it's still science and like it's not that far different, but it's whole new sets of protocols, whole new sets of information that I don't know. That I'm kind of learning from scratch and learning so that I can get my licensure, which is a whole like there's practical stuff where it's like, yeah, just do this, you'll be fine. And then there's no, you need to know this by the book so that you can demonstrate it on a test is something else entirely.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean that not as in like one is harder or better or worse, but literally they're just very different things, right? There is what
Well,
happened.
there's OJT and then there's theoretical knowledge.
Yeah. And often what is done in practice is not what is on the paper, right? Like
Right.
Because labs have different protocols and different ways of doing things that may or may not align with or may align partially, and it's all very different.
Yep.
So that's been a lot. My work with Freyer is bearing actual literal fruit in that I've got most of my plants in my garden are actually starting to bear fruit. I've got tomatoes and peppers and tomatillos coming in.
Nice.
A bunch of my flowers have started going fully to seed, which is nice. And I'm going to be doing a mix of both like wild seeding, just kind of letting those seeds drop and hopefully come up next year, and then also saving some just in case, because I'm going to have plenty of seeds to do both. I am. Fuck, I have been so busy. I am most of the way through learning the fire keeping protocols for pack stuff. that another member of the tradition has been teaching me, which has been very fun and exciting and very kind of. It's interesting because I've done sacred fires before, um, and it's similar, but there is specific things that are very different and are very kind of exacting, and it's
Mhm.
it's one of those
It's
like
almost like a tradition's developing. Fucking weird.
yeah, right, it's wild. So it's one of those like this is close enough that I know some of this already, and then a bunch of stuff. It's like, oh, I have to unlearn a bunch of things too. Okay,
Mhm.
um,
Makes sense.
also been working on very slowly, but still working on some plant stuff with Freya, sacred herb things. Yeah, I think that's most of everything. I'm certain that I'm forgetting things, but things are coming along.
Mhm.
Work and married life and spirit work and all kinds of shit. How about you? How are things?
I have been a bit busy. I have been working the overtime, but I'm working reduced hours of overtime, which is nice. Uh, yeah, we know Melkor. Y'all always out here doing the most.
Yep. Also, hey Melkor and Emily and Eleanor and Cookie. Nice to see all of you.
So I'm no longer doing overtime on Thursdays, but I'm doing stuff like more work with my kids on my days off. I'm doing a lot of other things besides. I'm getting. So I went to the Troth's Drinks and Divination monthly thing that they hold, and that was really cool. Um,
Nice.
and I had two excellent readings, both of which kind of banged me over the head. So I'm getting back to working on the Heathen Spirit Workbook. And the fucking thing isn't even in the first rough draft yet. I'm just with the outlines, and I'm already at 30,000 words.
Naturally.
So I'm looking at what I may need to do in order to make this either a duology or a trilogy. At this point, it's probably going to be a trilogy because I could probably do an entire Heathen Spirit Work book on just the runes, which kind of scares the hell out of me, but it's kind of also needed because, yeah, we haven't had a good Heathen Spirit Work rune book yet, like
Yeah.
one that's actually dedicated to it since I left my old elder.
Basically, there's not
So,
one out there that's not. Well, there's not one out there that talks about the runes of spirits that's not written by bad people. So
yeah, you've got Thorson. Well, actually, I will say the one rune workbook that I've worked through that I found really good that wasn't written by fashy people was Taking Up the Runes by Dana Paxson and Kelly Harrell's Runic Book of Days. And I know people have had mixed results with some of these, and I
Mhm.
get it, but I went through a runic initiation with both of those books, and they were very useful to me.
Mhm.
My problem with Paxson is that she still has Thorson's bullshit in there, and I was really hoping she'd excise that.
Yeah, and I
I
believe Freya Aswin as well, who is also
Oh
pretty.
yeah, she is. She's no longer a Troth member.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I have the old edition, so like
Yeah.
Freya's bullshit didn't come out when I was working through that book.
Yeah. It came out later, but that's how it is. And as Josie says, I'm pretty sure neither of y'all actually know how to chill the f out.
I
Yeah,
mean, this is relaxing.
I think it's relaxing, but it's fine.
Oh,
So
David is here.
I was about to say, you ready to intro our guest?
Yes. Welcome to the show, David.
Hey, apologies for being late.
You're
It's okay.
fine, no worries at all.
Yeah, I was
Welcome,
running
welcome.
behind on things.
Right,
It's all good. You weren't
you're
that
perfectly
late.
fine. gave us a chance to organize ourselves. Like we were a bit behind anyway.
Yeah. I wanted to thank you for coming on the show and for sharing your time with us.
Well, I'm
And
happy to be here.
oh yeah, and
Yeah.
it was a real pleasure having you on AGF. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll come on the show. That'd be great. So the way that we know your work is through your most recent book, which is Mystic Voices, and that book has to do with North Asian shamanism and magic.
Mhm.
Would you like to talk a little bit about how you came into writing the book in the first place and what your involvement is?
Sure. Actually, it's kind of funny how I got into writing this book because the acquisitions editor at Wiser has actually messaged me pretty much every year for about 5 or 6 years before I finally agreed to say yes. And it's mainly because I had no idea what I want to write about for the longest time.
Mhm.
I honestly did not feel qualified to write a book at all. But I think what ultimately led to the decision to write the book that I did was that currently there's not really a good resource on shamanism in North Asia. And all the resources out there are either extremely academic, so not even written by a practitioner, or they are just very expensive. There's a couple books out there that are more accessible, but they focus on very specific traditions and almost get a little bit too. They're written so like culturally heavy that it would just fly over the heads of any casual reader. So what I wanted to do was essentially create something of a guide that broadly covers the several different traditions out there, and a lot of them are very similar traditions because they come from the same shared roots. So in many ways highlight and celebrate what they share, as well as what makes them a little bit different, and actually make it understandable to people who have no idea what these traditions are, so it doesn't become confusing. And if nothing else, hopefully readers will feel inspired by certain practices or certain traditions, that if they want to do their own research, they can then go look for those heavy academic or in-depth things. So I kind of wrote this book to be something of a roadmap, but also provides a little bit of general kind of like good practices, good knowledge that pretty much could benefit anyone and everyone, to maybe help enhance people's own individual practices, because got to make the book relatable to
Right.
people in some way.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that really struck me about when I was reading it was, and Reno says hello to you. One of the things that really struck me about reading the book was how you tie in the history of the regions that you're talking about, and you explain like not only, hey, this is what white, yellow, and black shamanism is, but how they're relevant, their history, and the cultural context behind them. I have read several academic papers. I've read a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, and I've also listened to a lot of audiobooks on the history of like Mongolia and Manchuria, and they don't cover this. They don't put the pieces together. It's inaccessible.
Yeah, definitely. It's honestly, I read a lot of, even when I was reading a lot of those, I was confused as well, just sort of in my own exploration. So it was when I finally started to figure things out, I'm like, someone should do something about connecting these dots, because they are so disconnected. It's like, it's very like it's almost like when you come across resources and they have their own interpretations, but it's very hard to reconcile them because people write them from their own personalities or their own points of view. And actually, it was for me the only reason why I was able to figure a lot of this out is because I had the opportunity to talk to elders, and they were able to give sort of the practical information. And that's why I really don't like about a lot of those academic or those in-depth things, because the way they're written, it sounds very impractical. When you look at these people, I would say pretty much any northern peoples, whether it's Northern Asian or Northern European, they all live in conditions where you have to be practical with what you do. And And ultimately, what I wanted to accomplish with this book was to make it so that to reflect the practical aspects of these traditions, where they shouldn't be so overcomplicated.
Mm-hmm. So Emily points out, David, I really enjoyed how you delved into the history and cultural information as well as the particular practices and spirit voices. And also thank you for the maps. Those helped a ton. Yeah, same. Because I suck at geography. American education isn't all that great when it comes to figuring out where anything is besides our own backyard. So really appreciate, like, this is what we're talking about, and this is specifically where we're focusing.
It's really funny. I have to, I've traveled many places around the world. I've yet to find a place that does a good job teaching geography. It's not an American thing. I've come.
Oh, that is nice. Like, honestly, that helps.
It's like you cannot believe the conversations I have with people around the world, and their lack of geographical understanding is it's a global problem.
Yeah.
Ironically. Go ahead, brother.
Like one thing that I know a lot of Europeans run into is they're like, well, they just fully do not understand the size of the United States. Like they just do not grasp. Like, no, you are talking about basically 50 different countries. Any one of them the size of most European countries, some of them significantly larger. You do not understand the geographical area we are talking about here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When I can tell people that I can stay in the same state after a 16-hour drive, they look at me like my head's screwed on backwards.
Right.
It's like, y'all. Like when I hear about some of the journeys that you've gone through, whether it was through Manchuria or some of the back roads in Mongolia, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. This just reminds me of some of the back road journeys I had to take in order to get up to the UP, the Upper Peninsula here in Michigan, and get to Lake Superior and the Porcupine Mountains. Some of those roads are like, well, it's paved. Let's be thankful for that. Kat mentions a really excellent point. Geography is shaped by history, and history is taught very differently around the globe.
That is a good point.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really appreciate is that you decouple the great man theory, even though you do focus a bit on Genghis Khan. You talk a lot about the people and migration, trade, and culture patterns that shaped the history that we're talking about. I really appreciate that because so much of my history education, even in college, was great man theory shit. Yep. With not a lot of reference to this is how the people lived. And it's one of the things that I really appreciate your book actually takes the time to dig into a bit as much as you can while still focusing on shamanism.
Well, that's the thing about shamanism. I mean, I am of the opinion, I think not enough people are of this opinion, that if you really want to understand the shamanism or even the spirituality of any people, you have to know the culture. You have to know the people where they come from. Spiritual practices, whether shamanic or non-shamanic, they are developed because they were needed among those people. So if you don't understand why those people practice that, then then really we can't understand the practice itself.
Yeah. Spirituality is a conversation, a living conversation between any given people and their gods and spirits. And if you don't understand the culture of the people, you can't understand conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like American English and British English are roughly the same language, but you won't understand the two if you don't understand the cultural context. Like, you can say the same thing in both dialects and come out with wildly different meanings.
I had Australian relatives over at one point, and we say, bonk you on the head here. That means a very different thing in Australia. When somebody ran their head into a table, oh, did you bonk your head? And I didn't realize why my Australian relatives were just dying. Because, well, you got fucked in the head was basically what she was saying, not realizing it.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's the small things in life. One of the things that also I wanted to kind of Oh, one of the things I wanted to kind of touch base with you on was with regard to some of these elders. One of the things that you have pointed out again and again has been how hard it is to pass these things on, and in some ways, the book is kind of a living treasure in that regard because you're recording the elders' voices. I mean, we're living through a period where there's like maybe I want to say there's 7 um, actual like fully fluent speakers of I believe it's Dine. Um, you know, so like languages and elders all around the world are trying their hardest to save things. And one of the things that they're running into is, at least with I believe the Ojibwe language, was that some 20 something years ago, some ethnographers came through and did a ton of recordings, and now they're trying to sell this stuff back to the tribe. Um, one of the things that makes me really happy about supporting your book is that not only is this like a living treasure and the elders have had their hands in it, but it's also something where you're providing a guidebook not only for people like us here on the show who might have an interest and are looking to learn more, but you're also providing guides for the diaspora. And that's one of the things that really came through when I was reading this book was like the weight of that. How did you cope with that? That's a lot.
I mean, the way that I mean, it's possible. It's impossible to to really wade and cope through that without thinking of myself, because I'm really the way that I think about that is, my gosh, this is a book that I wish I had 10 years ago, and I had to even and almost for other people who are similar to me, if they want this knowledge, they might not have to go through 10 years worth of work just to get something that is you can figure it out in 1 year. So
right.
So a lot of this is just being able, like, just providing this additional resource for people who could really use it. And one thing that struck me is that when I was writing it, I was only thinking of it in terms of people who are of North Asian descent, which I kind of tricked myself into thinking there's not that many of us, especially here in the US. There's even less. Most of them are still in Asia. There's larger numbers in Europe, and so I kind of tricked myself into thinking, in the US there's probably not going to be that many. But the funny thing is, after this book got published, I did get a lot of people reaching out to me who like, oh, I have a little bit of this ancestry, I have a little bit of that ancestry, and they ask me questions and such. And even not people who are not directly North Asian, I've even had people of Korean heritage reach out to me, because there is like some similarities as well. Mm-hmm. And then I've had people from of all different types of Asian heritages reach out to me, just being curious about the nature of spirits and the spirit world. And it does really seem like, at least with the diaspora, there is a little bit of a generational gap of knowledge of just how we see the spirits and how we interact with them. And so it's even people who come from wildly different. I even have people come to me who are from Southeast Asian traditions, and I'm surprised. Actually, I'm surprised how many of them do come up to me, because they're just curious about just Asian interaction with spirits and how and what that perspective is. Because I think they mostly see Western perspectives, and even for their own perspectives, it's difficult to. I mean, finding elders, if you're in the diaspora, finding elders is difficult. That's something I want to acknowledge, and I think for any culture, especially here in the U.S., where all of us are diaspora in a sense. So finding elders is difficult, and I think what I've realized is, as people come to me, they also want to be able to connect with like a heritage or a lineage that that is able to connect the diaspora with the source land. And this is and people have actually come up to me from even non-Asian heritage, saying that they found my experience very relatable, and that's why they follow my work, which honestly was something that surprised, and I know it sounds like I'm low-key bragging, but it was actually something
No.
that surprised me.
No, I don't consider it bragging. It's your experience. And as a heathen spirit worker from a completely different tradition, I found a lot that I was just nodding my head along to as I went through this, going, "Oh yeah, I recognize that. That kind of translates to this idea." You know, it's just when I was going through and taking notes on it, there was just so many points where I was like, "Yep, that makes sense." You know, the section that really kind of stuck out to me was like the glossary of spirits, and I'm like, "Oh,
yeah.
we have words for those. Neat."
Yeah.
That's how many of our experiences were shared across the expanse of our traditions. Kat also says, you know, you're allowed to brag you've done the work to earn that right.
And we did this. We did it again.
Go ahead, Elfkin. My hands are off the clicker now.
There we go. Melkor also says, you've earned the right to brag. To be honest, you put in the work. You should get your roses.
Well, thank you.
So part of the reason I'm asking these questions is I'm putting together a Heathen Spirit Work book, which is turning into probably a multi-volume thing. And I really, I've put out one book before, and it was on an ancestor devotional, and it's going to come into a second edition at some point down the road where it'll turn to a workbook and devotional. And one of the things that really struck me as you were talking, both on this episode and with us on AGF, was the process you had to go through of, okay, this can be included, this can't, this has to be taught. I'm not qualified at this point to teach, but this is what this indicates. Like, I know that you were working hand in glove with a lot of elders on this book. What was your personal decision on what to include, what not to include? Like,
I mean, it was tough, and it was even tough on the ego at the beginning because essentially I put together first I had to ask the various elders for permission, because if any of them had said no, this book would not have been a thing. It's like I even told my publisher, if any of my elders say no, we're done with the contract. And I mean, they all pretty much said yes with caveats. And once I put together a draft, I made sure that the elders were the first to see it before the publisher, before anyone, just so that, they can go through it and they can, because I don't even want to reveal anything that they think is just inappropriate, whether it goes down to even the tiny details. And it was a good thing I did, because the amount of, red pen work that the elders put into the manuscript, literally after they got back, literally one of them was like, "Hey, can we just talk?" And I'm like, "Oh no."
No.
And yeah, I think I had multi-hour sessions with them, just going through parts, and even parts when it comes, because I'm talking about different traditions, right? So sometimes I have to take an objective look at just some of the people's, how some of them work, and literally some of the elders were like, why do you think that, why would you write it that way about us when we are something like that? And I have to explain, well, if we're talking about ancient history, there's many perspectives. I know that's taught one way in your country and then it's taught another way in another country. I have to be objective, and just let everyone know the different perspectives. And then they would just go through going like, "Oh, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about this." And then there were a couple times where they're like, "This part is just wrong, so it has to be rewritten." And I'm like, "Oh my god."
You just fully fucked that up. Oh, oops.
Yeah, so I literally had to go through just even before with the publisher, I had to go through multiple rounds of edits just with the elders to make sure that what I write is appropriate. And then even the things that I do write about, I'm sort of dancing the line between, saying something exists versus saying how to do it.
Gotcha.
And then even even there are even parts of I won't say too much right now, but even the glossary of spirits, there were several types of spirits that I had to leave out, because it's even knowledge of certain types of spirits was considered a secret. Yep. Or not even considered a secret, or considered too dangerous for the public to know about. So So yeah, it's and another hard part was when different traditions have conflicting ideas on what is a secret. So so like for example, like pretty much among the Mongolian peoples, juniper is the main herb that they use for cleansings, for offerings. It's pretty much public open knowledge. But then some other tribes in Siberia use another herb as their primary herb, but the Mongolians consider that to be a secret herb.
Gotcha.
So I had to even dance the line of, like I even had to like exclude parts where I say like this herb, which is used by both tribes, which I had to remove that, be like this herb used by that tribe.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's so that was a tough process. Ultimately, I think with the elders that I've talked to, I mean they gave their final approval. They did admit that there were things about neighboring traditions that they also didn't know about, so they had to just edit the parts about their own traditions. So I think I'm hoping that there is even people who are like native North Asians, they do appreciate that this is a comprehensive look even at not only just their traditions but neighboring traditions, and a lot of them don't ever see that side to side like comparison either, because they're so honed in on their own tradition. So yeah, so it's it's I had a lot of obviously I've had a lot of moments of like of self-doubt when like, is this even something I should even bother continue with? Should I just call the publisher and just tell them it's off? It's
I honestly think that I'm grateful that you did actually get to finish it, because we have so much new age bullshit masquerading as genuine knowledge that it gets kind of dicey trying to separate the ice cream from the bullshit.
Yeah.
Something that Emily pointed out that I also wanted to emphasize was she said, I also love how you did descriptions of all the useful jobs that weren't necessarily done by the shamans themselves. That is so not emphasized in any of the literature, academic or otherwise. That is so frustrating, because like there's an entire ecosystem of stuff that helps support the shaman's work and people that help support the shaman's work, and they're usually ignored.
Oh yeah. It's, well, I mean, I think something that there's this one analogy that Nicholas Breezewood made that I actually like. I actually kind of like is where he would describe like in their ecosystem, the shaman is probably comparable to a surgeon, but like not every person is a surgeon, but people can learn first aid, and then there's various types of roles in between. Like so many, like there's like there's herbal healers, there's bone setters, there's like even blacksmiths have a role, which in some tribes can actually overpower shamans if they were a spiritually trained blacksmith.
Right. That was the thing that I appreciated, because I've only seen that particular thing in a couple of sources, and the first place that I ran into that was Sarangarel.
Yeah.
And that kind of shook me, because hers was the only book that I actually found a reference to that in. Most of the academic sources don't bother mentioning where these folks get their tools from, let alone the empowerment work or any of the other stuff that goes into that. So it was really refreshing to see like something besides Chosen by the Spirits or Windhorse, where you're actually like, hey, so there's other stuff people do. It's not just the shaman is the one hat fits all.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of both, in that those traditions, because the concepts of shamans and the way that shamans work is so integral to some of these cultures and their histories, a lot of their spirituality does kind of surround it. But yeah, you're right, they're not by any means the only workers. In fact, and there's so many other different types of workers that support that ecosystem, and they're a lot of times they're just in the shadows, or they're just completely ignored altogether, despite the vital role that they do play. Frankly, in any of these societies, it's really tough for a shaman to operate in a vacuum. Because if they don't have, like you said, if they don't have access to a lot of the tools, then a lot of their work is limited. It's actually really ironic in that for a lot of these traditions, the tools are very important, and they kind of having good reliable tools can make or break the shaman's efficacy and their success rate. So it's very important to be able to have sources to be able to come up with these other things, these tools and such.
Well, I mean, you called the shamans being a lot like a surgeon. There's a big hefty difference between somebody using a kitchen knife versus a scalpel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, surgeons have a lot of skill and are very important. They also have massive networks of support teams that if basically any piece of that goes away, they can't do their jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone from the people in the operating room with them to like the med tech staff who are diagnosing their patients. Like, it's a lot.
So kind of jumping aside, I saw you were drinking something there. What are you drinking with us tonight?
It was something I just found in my fridge. It's like it's basically a Vizzy hard seltzer.
Neat. I have not tried this yet.
Honestly, I must have just gotten it from like a CVS or something. It's been sitting in my fridge for a while. I'm like, if I don't drink it now, I might as well drink it now.
That's fair. Set up an offering for the spirits with vodka, and this is Empress 1908 Indigo Gin and a little bit of Jack Daniel's honey whiskey. For your spirits, I just had vodka because I didn't. I remember something about they like clean offerings.
Well, for liquor, they're used to clear colored liquor. It's anything that I think for a lot of North Asian spirits, they don't recognize liquor that has color to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like multiple different shamans have reported when they try to offer whiskey or rum or gin, like the spirits are like, that looks dirty. It's like, what you put in that.
So I did offer them just straight up vodka because I know that's a safe offering. So yeah. I appreciate that teaching.
Sometimes that's what the insights are. It's like what do the spirits recognize and what they don't recognize, and it's funny how that then translates into traditions, and what is considered traditional is basically what the spirits are used to seeing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Maleck.
I didn't really have a thought, just kind of like, that makes sense. That's thinking about like the pack spirits that I work with and all of that. And it's like, how does this work? Well, sometimes it's like translation issues you get into where it's like they don't know. Not that they don't know. Kind of they don't know. I'm struggling to put words together. Apologies. Basically what you said, right? Where it's like if they don't recognize it, they don't know what the fuck to do with it, right? Like, if I go up to a bunch of wolf spirits and I offer them coins, they're going to be like, what do I do with this? Thanks, I guess. So, other offerings are more appropriate. It just depends.
I'm having this mental image of when like you're at like a public space and someone just gives you something, you're like, oh, okay, and then like 2 seconds later you just toss it.
Yeah. Thanks. Put this over here. Anyway.
It's interesting because you'll get some gods, ancestors, and spirits who want exceptionally specific things in a very certain way. And then you'll get certain spirits who are like, whatever you can throw together and put in front of me, that sounds good. If it's alcohol, great. If it's meat, that's okay too. And I think some of this comes down to tradition, but some of it is just like understanding the spirit you're talking to and their perspective, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that kind of really struck me both in speaking with you and reading the book is like some of these require you to step completely outside of your own perspective to understand.
Yeah.
Because we think of whiskey as like maybe not it's Jack Daniel's honey whiskey, so it's a well drink for a lot of folks. Um, whereas, you know, like you said, the spirits are like, what the fuck did you put in that? And you got to kind of step outside of your own perspective and be willing to listen to theirs.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that's the growing pains of any type of relationship working with any of the spirits. It's being able to understand that. It's almost like the way that the funny thing with shamanism I found is that it's very much it's a relationship business. It's if you know, for lack of a better phrase, it's being able to, you know, form good relationships and being able to, you know, just understand what the other side recognizes, needs, wants, and it's probably a similar to, if not a more sophisticated form of interpersonal relationships with other people.
Yeah. And so my question is kind of stepping away from the book itself and more into your experiences, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things that you talked about around Grandfather Fire on was when you were learning all these things, it was exceptionally applicable to the region that you were studying in. And that when you came back to the States and had to bring this knowledge, there was a whole different ball of wax where you kind of had to go, okay, does this apply to the spirits here now? Can you talk a little bit about the process of having to figure that out and what you had to do?
Yeah, sure. So I guess to caveats, so a lot of I guess the quote unquote like formula that we kind of work with especially within North Asian traditions is our shamanic spirits, you know, 99% of the time are ancestral spirits of some kind. So it's very much, you know, the culture of, you know, those of the North Asian regions. But in order to be able to properly and fully connect with ancestral spirits, we need to have a working relationships with the land spirits around us as well. There's actually a saying that, you know, whenever the ancestral shamanic spirits come into us, they come riding on the backs of the land spirits, because the land spirits are the only spiritual entities that are indigenous to the physical world. Like even our own souls aren't from the physical world. They came from somewhere else to inhabit by, and then after we die, our souls leave. So it's important to be able to have a working and a strong relationship with local land spirits as well. And to the points that I think you were referencing is when I came back, I had to reconcile that even though I'm working with North Asian ancestral spirits, I have to do it through the lens of the American land spirits, or the land spirits of, you know, this particular area in New York. So a lot of the ways that I would typically work with land spirits, it had to shift a little bit to look into what do the land spirits here enjoy, what do the land spirits here don't like, and what is the proper way of engaging with them. And so by being able to build that relationship there, then it becomes a little bit easier to then work with even higher entities, such as, you know, ancestral spirits or even other spirits or deities. So that's kind of the main thing in terms of learning what the local land spirits here are like. So actually, many years ago, it was actually before I understood this concept, my ancestral spirits actually encouraged me to learn the folk magic of the people living here in the U.S., which, you know, included African American hoodoo, because that was how, you know, the people here interacted with, you know, the spirits around them. And that's something that I had to learn to understand. And I had to learn to be able to, you know, build that relationship with the land spirits so that they can facilitate connection to spirits that are ironically more familiar to me. So, and that's something that that I hope I emphasize in the book, but I encourage everyone, wherever they are, even if they're not on the land of their ancestors, it's important to understand the folklore, the mythology of the land that they're on, because if they don't, it's going to be very hard to connect with any other spirits. And so this applies again to the diaspora very much specifically, because we have that unique challenge that the spirits that are around us are not the spirits of our ancestry, and we need to be able to understand and be able to work with both. So in some ways, as a diaspora, we're kind of forced to become more open-minded about, what other spiritualities, what other mythologies, what other personalities are around us that may not, I mean, to be honest, may not necessarily fall within our direct even line of interest. I think one of the biggest traps that a lot of spiritual workers fall into is once they find something of interest, they kind of zero in on it and sort of ignore everything else. Which, I mean, of course, it's probably fine in terms of satisfying your own intellectual curiosity, but to truly be able to connect with them, you have to connect with what's also around you.
Yep. Yeah, fully agreed. It's something I run into. Oh, go ahead, Maleck.
I was just going to say, it did come through very strongly, the emphasis on land spirits. I will say, as someone who read the book, I will say the emphasis on land spirits did come through very strongly. And it was one of the things that I particularly appreciated, because I really feel like that's missing from a lot of spirituality books, is that kind of emphasis on not just like, because a lot of times when that does show up, it's more like environmentalism focused, which is, don't get me wrong, like very important.
Yes.
But it's also like, no, these are like, I often tell people, spirits are people too. You need to like treat them as though they are a person, and you'll get along a lot better. And dealing with the fact that you are surrounded by people who just don't look like humans is very important and often missed.
Yeah, it's one thing that I also come across a lot, especially whenever I'm in, some of the more, neo-pagan or, Wiccan circles, is that a lot of them don't have any idea what I'm talking about when I refer to land spirits, because I think a lot of it is missing. Like there have also been podcasts where I've been on where when I mention land spirits, they come back with, do you mean elementals? And I'm like, no. I mean, it
No.
can be, but no.
Oh no!
No, what I mean, that's
No.
It can be kind of related, but no, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know who Morgan Daimler is.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Mhm.
So they were talking about the Aoshi
Mhm.
and how misunderstood they are within certain circles, and this elemental versus land spirit thing versus they're their own class of spirit is one of the things that they have to fight against a lot.
Yeah. I was actually listening to both of the episodes. I was actually kind of marveling at how similar some of the advice given was, and some of the experience between a primarily Fey worker and you, David, like exploring traditional shamanism. I was like, there's a lot more overlap there. Like, it wasn't unexpected because I know folks in the Fey region, but like it was like, okay, so I'm not crazy. There is a lot of overlap here. Okay.
It's one of those things where the cultural exchange actually matters quite a bit. Like you coming on the show and sharing your information, and us being willing to like reflect and say, hey, this sounds a lot like this concept from pack magic, heathenry, etc. To me, it's like, yeah, we may not be on the same knowledge base or spiritual footing or what have you, nor do we need to be. But what it does is allows us an opportunity to share knowledge and information. Mm-hmm. And I think that by understanding our own biases, by understanding our own spiritual perspectives, basically, and doing the deep dive work, and then going, okay, great, we have theoretical knowledge. How does this practically relate? Before you came on the show, Maleck was talking about how they were having to learn some various things at work as part of their job, and some of them are theoretical, and some of them are never going to get applied in the lab because that's just not how this fucking lab operates. And I love that practicality, and I see that as like part of shamanism, as part of spirit work. And I'm trying to be careful here because I'm not trying to equate what I do as a spirit worker with what a shaman does. I know that there's overlap, but I'm not qualified to speak on shamanism because I'm not really that. But as a spirit worker, as somebody that works hand in glove with the spirits and has a lot of relationships that at the very least sound like a lot of what the shamans go through. In my own case, I was taken up by Odin. He brought me to where I am as a heathen spirit worker, had me do a shitload of initiation work. Wasn't really my consent was nice, but not all that required. So there's a lot of echoes that I feel.
Yeah.
But he did actually make me take the term shaman on for a while, and it never sat right with me because it's got this entire galaxy of information around it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people and this might, I don't know if this is a cultural thing or if it's a capitalist thing or it's a thing that, a lot of people in the West think of roles, whether it's shaman or anything else, and they define it by what they do, when in the original cultures, that's not how a shaman is defined. That's not how really a lot of spiritual workers define. A lot of them are going to do very, very similar work. That's just, the reality of it. It's the difference is not by what they do. It's by the condition that they are put in, or the condition that they're born in, and what they are empowered to be able to do, and which they might not ever do, but they're empowered to do it. And
Right.
that's the difference. Like I'll one thing that I'll say off the bat is that in the cultures where the word shaman comes from, a shaman implies someone who was chosen by the spirits when they are born to become the vessel between the human and spirit worlds. And by having essentially, like what Sarangarel says in her books, is that the shaman is born with an extra soul, which I kind of get what she's getting at. It's basically when they're chosen by their shamanic spirits, that shamanic spirit becomes all like an extra soul because they're
Right.
constantly there with your own soul. And then they're able to do various works, whether it's transpossession, whether it's, spirit flight, whether it's all these other things. So the implication of that is that the fact that they are born and they're chosen when they're born to do a certain thing implies almost like a lack of choice, in that this is something that they have. Like, you can't just become one because if you weren't chosen, but if you are chosen, there's no you have to do it, or else you'll be punished, you might die. Yep. And so that is the nuanced difference, because if we talk about things that a shaman does, like transpossession or even spirit flight, a lot of different spiritualities and practices around the world have something that overlaps or something that comes really close. But the fact that this type of condition exists, it's one, because that was what that community required. It's almost like if no one does spiritual work, well, then someone has to be forced to do it.
Yep.
It becomes like something like that. And that's, I think that creates a dynamic, and that creates a type of relationship, and that is different from any other spiritual work or cultural work, spiritual work in other parts of the world. And that's what really defines a shaman, as opposed to any other type of spirit worker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gets really dicey because in a lot of circles, we don't have the verbiage. And it's why I appreciate books and you coming on the show and being willing to talk on this, in part because the verbiage in a lot of cases isn't there to have that nuanced conversation. And it's something that I keep running across again, both in your work and others, is that it's not that the shaman is necessarily special, it's that they're unique, and there's a difference. Yeah. Like, yes, you are uniquely chosen by the spirits. It doesn't make you special. And one of the things that really kind of brought this across was when I started watching Mudong Jen on TikTok.
Yeah.
Okay, good. You know who she is.
Oh, we're really good friends, actually.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, we're really good friends. Yeah.
Also someone I'd love to have in the show and like to pick her brain. she is one of those people who is like continuously pointed out, like, hey, like having a shaman in the family was sometimes a mark of shame because it took them like out of the breeding pool, out of the money pool. It took them completely out of the economy. It almost made you a non-person. Like from the way that she was describing, at least in some of the ways that shamans are treated, they're almost like, they're not really treated as people. They're treated more like curiosities or outcasts.
Or a burden on the family.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of similar. So in some European traditions, blood offerings like auto sacrifice is very strictly taboo. And that is, I'm thinking specifically in some of the Roman mythology and like traditions, because doing so would be, it was actually a punishment. Offering a person to the gods, usually that person was still alive when they were offered, was a really bad criminal punishment because you became sacred to those gods that you were offered to. No one could, like, you became basically their property, right? You had to live in the temple. You had to do this and that and the other. And like normal people couldn't just go talk to you. It was basically you belong to the god and only their will was done. You lost all autonomy.
Getting the equivalent of a smack upside the head when you ignore the call of your work seems to be a thing across the board, though the shaman side seems a bit more intense. And I would say that definitely came through in your book, but also in Saran Girl's work as well. Like one of the things that she kept repeating in both of her books was like, you'll know if you're called to this because you won't be able to stop.
Yeah.
And that very much, that both your work and hers resonated with me in that way. And that very much resonates with my own experience from Cookie Queen. And then something that Emily mentioned was that you're basically becoming a tool for the community. In a similar way that, you know, the blacksmith is making your regalia and your tools, you're becoming a tool for the community. You're actually getting fashioned in a certain way that makes you useful for the spirits.
Yeah, one thing that I like to always put it as a comparison, I think this probably helps drive the point home for some people, is that for a lot of different people, whether they're spiritual practitioners just themselves personally, or even a lot of different spiritualities, for them, the goal is, you know, achieving, you know, personal spiritual advancement or, you know, spiritual enlightenment, or, you know, detaching themselves from, you know, the material to all that stuff. But the thing is that for something like the role of a shaman, that's something that they can't ever do. If anything, they do have to sacrifice their own spiritual needs in order to serve the community, because the fact that they were chosen, they have to have a foot in both the physical and the material, and they have to serve both, which means they can't ever separate themselves from the material world, because they have to provide for the needs for both, you know, the spiritual world and the physical world, to ensure, you know, that balance within the community. So and oftentimes that means putting yourself at risk and putting your almost like putting your own health at risk, because that's what you are, because that's what the role entails. So it's really funny when I come across, you know, some of the more new age people who think, you know, the role of a shaman is like, oh, so enlightened, when it's furthest from the truth.
I actually find it kind of interesting in that regard, because with a lot of these cultures that it comes out of, especially where Buddhism is like one of the main drivers of culture, you're actually kind of fucking yourself, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. It's it basically you cannot achieve the like you might help everyone else with their spiritual goals, but you can't ever get there yourself, because you're kind of in a way tied down. The fact that you're chosen when you were born, basically that shaman spirit relationship pretty much ties you to the physical people and the spirits that are directly around you. And so it's
congrats, like, you're never getting off the fucking wheel.
And the funny thing is, like, even when a shaman passes away, their soul has to become the next shamanic spirit that then
the work never ends. Here's a bigger shovel.
Yeah, so it's almost like there's an extra step before getting anywhere in the beyond.
Oh, that's rough. I think that if more people understood that about the shamanic, it's not even really a calling; it's like a demand, right?
It really is a demand.
Calling implies you can turn away from it. Like this thing's gonna fucking haunt you, or you're gonna die. Like you're gonna do it, or you're gonna die. Melkor notes, working as a trench medic, you get people up and out, but you're always still in there because there's always work to do. And I think that's a pretty good analogy from the sounds of it, because like the point of a shaman is to be in the trenches with the rest of us, right?
Yeah, pretty much. You basically you're always kind of putting you're making yourself a little bit of a target. So and that's why it's because the shaman always has sort of that extra spirits that are constantly around them, that they can essentially act as almost that target for any type of like whether it's a spiritual attack or pollution or harmful entity, because they are, due to the condition that of them being a shaman, they are able to deal with it, so that they then become a target.
Right.
And it's part of the reason, it's actually the same reason why shamans have to wear some type of armor. I know there are a lot of shamanic cultures, they have reduced the armor, or it's even becomes like a non-armor kind of thing, but they wear like a full like regalia armor, because it's, in a way, it's meant, if they were to go into the spirit world, they have to hide the fact that they are a human, let alone shaman. It's right. Like actually if you ever look at pictures of like an actual traditional Mongolian shamanic regalia or armor, it's not meant to look cool. Well, I mean, it's primarily meant for protection, but two, it's also meant to hide the fact that they are a person / shaman, so that if they are in it and they go to the spirit world and let's say a ghost or demon passes through, they won't notice anything off about you, because you just look like a fellow entity from their world.
So that's interesting, because a lot of well, for instance, I have my white wolf skin here. And so when I journey forth in spirit form, that's a form that I will adopt in a lot of cases. And some spirits recognize me that way, some spirits don't. But it makes a total amount of sense that you're trying as much as you can to not look like Sarenth the human, because you don't want this shit following you home.
Yeah.
You want it to be like over there.
No, it's funny you mentioned that, Sarenth. I was going to remark that it sounds a lot like a lot of the shape-shifting work that I'm familiar with from the heathen and the pack sides. Like that makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff makes sense. Some of the spiritual technologies may not be exactly one-to-one, but there's a lot that really resonates here. And I'm like, it's part of the reason I was like nodding through most of the book as I was reading it, like, nah, that shit makes total sense. Like I will carry, like, for instance, I have what's called in our tradition, it's called a Taufer bag, and it's full of these charms and stuff, physical enchanted objects. Like for instance, I've got a spear in there, I've got a sword, I've got a troll cross for
welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And what's funny is that it will repel the troll spirits that I don't want to work with, and it's almost like an invitation for the ones that I do. So some of these Taufer do double duty, that they shield me from some things and bring in for others. And some of the regalia that you're talking about, the Torii, for instance, like the one that you're wearing right now, is a really excellent example, I think, of this, of like reflective, but also bringing in. And I while it's not a one-to-one thing, whether it's the troll cross or the necklaces I'm wearing or some of the tattoos that I have, I find a lot of resonance across traditions because of like what these are meant to do. So in a lot of ways, my runes are bringing in the spirits of the runes, but they're also expressing the magic. For some people, they are repellent. For some people, they're attractive.
Yeah. For
some spirits, they are like, get the fuck away from me, you weird bitch. And then for some of them, they're like, hey, that motherfucker we can talk to.
I think thing to, if I may, kind of highlight for me, like my experience reading the book and like listening to your episode on Around Grandfather Fire, is that while there was a lot of, and certainly for myself, like Sarenth was talking about nodding, I was just getting slapped every 30 seconds. It's fine. Like, hey, pay attention. This part's important. Please read more.
You should write that down.
Yeah, you should write that down. It's fine. But a lot of what was being pointed out to me was not just similarities, but also like that doesn't apply. That's completely different from what we do. You need to know that it's completely different from how we do things. The differences are in many ways just as important and in many ways just as beautiful as the similarities. At least I found.
Was there any that that really came out that really struck you? I'll just have curiosity more than anything.
Yeah.
Do you need a minute?
Yeah, I need a minute. Please.
So one of the things that really struck me was, and this struck me when I read Sarangarel's Chosen by the Spirits, but it also struck me again when I read your book, was the Chotgor, and how some spirits can be converted out of the state of disease and into allies. I have had this happen. It's been really fucking wild because they turn out to be some of the most dedicated spirit allies you get. In part because my process for doing this was probably a bit different, but basically just washing them clean and getting them to a place where they're actually healthy and able to work with people again. Mm. It kind of reminds me, and I'm going to use an anime analogy, with not Princess Mononoke, excuse me, Spirit Away, where Chihiro cleans the river spirit.
Yes, yeah, I love that scene.
It's Spirit Away and Princess Mononoke are like two of my top films, and they have so much wisdom in them. But that scene in particular really reminds me of cleaning up certain spirits and bringing them into your relationship. And when it came to that, I very much connected with the notion of the Chotgor becoming an ally. One of the other things that really struck me was the multi-soul matrix that the different cultures have, and it's one that, as a heathen, I share. To a certain degree, it depends on what heathen you talk to. We have between 4 and 17 parts. And one of the things that I really appreciated about your book was you're like, yeah, so there's usually like 3, but it depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah. Well, what I typically say, there's at least 3. It's 3 or more.
Yeah, I appreciate that because I have to give a similar kind of answer, and people are like, well, so how many souls are there? I'm like, at least 4.
More than 1.
Yeah. Some of the comments were the work contract is automatically renewed in terms of the shaman gets to the end of life and then has to work some more, and then possibly the shaman acts as a scapegoat for the society.
They have. It's usually, for societies that still have that still are traditional in terms that they still have faith in the shamans. They do have. There is actually a widespread superstition that helps us that says even if what happens because of the shaman, whether it's their fault or their inability to do something, it's extremely bad luck to try to go against a shaman or piss one off unless you have another shaman by your side, because literally their spirits could fuck with you, basically, for lack of a better phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Even one of my friends who I consider an elder, she actually said that she has to make sure that she controls her anger when she's out in public, because if someone really pisses her off, even just without her intention, one of her spirits will just come roaring in and attack that person.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That resonates hard.
Yeah.
So it's really funny. She goes that person died a week later. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe and then one of our mutual friends was like, please don't admit to murder online.
Please don't. Yeah.
Discord is a cop.
Yeah. I've had I was going to one of my really close ancestor spirits for advice about how to deal with my boss when he was being a complete asshole, previous boss. But and he looked me in the face and he was like, do not come to me with this question, because my advice is you fucking kill him. And I was like, I can't do that. He was like, I know you can't do that. That's why I said, don't come to me with this question.
Surreptitiously sharpens his sword, cleans his gun.
Just like, he was like, no, because in your position, I would commit murder. And I'm like, okay, we're gonna not talk to you about this. Other things, yes, not this.
This is where knowing your spirits is a really important part of the journey.
It really is.
To kind of pick up on a couple of the other comments, the call is coming from inside the shaman. I think this was in reference to earlier when we were talking about some of the scapegoating and the issues that go on with shamanism itself. And then picking a fight with you on your journey, like sometimes, like if you look a certain way, certain spirits are going to get their dander up, right? And this was in reference to when you were talking about why you wear armor.
Yeah.
In Fey, this was an interesting one that I wanted to point out. In Fey practice, iron, salt, bramble thorns, and hawthorn berries do very similar things. Either they repel or they hide.
Depending on which you're talking about, and etc.
Yeah, like iron might not do shit to certain Fey.
Yeah.
And you know, this is where the cultural context comes into play, and where you have to know your shit. And we're terms like cold steel. What that means is like, is that an edged weapon or not? Like, it doesn't mean like it's cold steel. Like all steel is cold if you put it in the fridge. Like, like are you talking about an edged weapon or not? Yeah. I think something more tacticians need to be aware of. Their spirits will take up their cause, so to speak. So yeah. We got a Jesus dude! Yay! This is our first one. Hold on. Thank you so much, Patrick.
We're gonna show and shame.
Oh, you're adorable.
Jesus, God, only one way.
Hey, this genius posted his credentials from what university is that? Well, you know what? God bless you. You're our first Christian on the stream.
All right. So they're on the stream now. For if anyone gets curious.
Neat. Okay. Well, welcome, Patrick.
And he's on.
And goodbye.
Yep. I have 0%.
I'm sorry. That's fucking excellent. That's the first Christian interloper we've had on stream. Like, oh, you're fucking adorable. Anyway.
It's very ironic. Most of the quote unquote like hate that I get is actually not even from Christians. It's from atheists.
Really?
Yeah, oh, I don't get the Christians coming to me. It's the atheists that come to me.
Well, I'm sure it's the three pagans part that kind of makes them twitch. Oh, yeah. That's funny. Oh, interesting. Go ahead, Maleck.
I was just gonna say, getting back to the thing that I've been thinking about and it took me forever because my brain is partially fried. One of the differences, speaking of the armor, is you mentioned how like a shaman's armor will accumulate prayer flags and various things over time, and that's actually a way to see how experienced and powerful a shaman is their regalia has more and more pieces added to it, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas like with my wolf skin, that is absolutely not. Do not put things on that. That would slow you down. That is not what you want. Right. It wouldn't. Taboo is the wrong word. It would just be stupid. Impractical, right? It would be. Yeah, it would be a thing that would. Why are you wearing this? It's getting in the way. You can't run with a belt and like a dozen streamers on your back. That doesn't make any sense. That'll just get you caught.
No capes.
Yeah. As my partner sitting next to me says, no capes.
It's one of the things that I think is a mark of a lot of shaman armor is, except for maybe the headdress, you could definitely see somebody taking that shit into an actual battle back in the day. Like, once some of the stuff clearly not, but like some of the older shamanic garb that I've seen from like museum collections where it's like that looks an awful lot like segmented armor. Okay, like literally shaman armor. Got you. um,
I almost imagine that like as like the difference between maybe like heavy infantry versus light cavalry.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, with a lot of the cavalry, like you needed to be able to see where the hell this guy was going. So like, with whereas the Roman helmets with the giant fringe on the back, or the hussars with the giant fucking wings on the back, like, yeah, like some of this stuff's for intimidation purposes, but like in terms of the shamanic armor, like a lot of this stuff, and one of the things that I think you bring forth a lot, both in your books and just these conversations, is like how practical this stuff is. Like, if I can't like get this on and wear it, and the spirits can't use it, why am I doing this? A Torii mirror is incredibly practical. I can wear it, I can reflect, I can capture, I can move spirits with it, I can be moved by spirits with it. Whereas if you're talking like, I'm gonna bring a big fuck off obsidian scrying mirror everywhere I go, like that's not only not practical, but that shit's gonna get broke the first time a spirit decides to look at it the wrong way.
I mean, yeah, it's the thing with, like North Asian peoples is not all of them, many of them are nomads. So they need to be able to carry everything with them. Actually, with a lot of the really old school, like Mongolian lineages, if any of you have seen any of their drums, some of the drums are super thick. Like they don't look like drums because they're so thick. That's because when not in use, their armor, their tools all go inside the drum. The drum itself becomes a carrying case.
Oh, neat! I did not know that.
Yeah, so literally, like the thinner drums that you see now, that's more of a modern thing, because the really old school thing is you put all of your shaman stuff either in the drum or it's in like a separate trunk somewhere else, because it has to be stuff that you can just carry with you.
Gotcha. Oh, that's neat. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. I follow a couple of Mongolian creators on TikTok, and one of the things that is pretty consistently pointed out is like, there's only so much fucking room in this gur. Does this make sense to have in here? Like, and they don't point it out. It's just the way that they take stuff out and they work with it. Like, there's a one guy that I follow who's he's a Mongolian living out of his gur, and he does a lot of cooking videos. And he shows you like how we cook up here in the fucking frozen north. And it's like, well, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. The chest freezer's outside. People are like in his comments asking, well, why do you put all your stuff outside? Aren't you worried about animals? Like, no, I literally built an ice chest. Like, it's literally a chest of ice. There's nothing getting in here besides me. And it's like a 2-foot thick chest freezer out in the fucking snow. He shows you how to do it. Like, it's not like, just like watch the video, smart ass. But like, it's utterly practical. Where, okay, like if I got to pack up and follow the herd, I can leave this here and we can visit this some other time. Like if I need to come back and get food. Like
it's part of the reason why I think one of the biggest, I guess culture clashes that I come across when coming across practitioners in the West or here in the US is the fact that a lot of people here have multiple altars. And like for any of the North Asians, like, no, we put everything on one altar. If any of the spirits don't get along, well, we have to choose which one we go with, and it's probably the ancestral ones, and the ones that are not ancestral, bye.
Deal or leave. I get that.
Yeah.
So I used to have something like 11 altars when I lived at my previous home. This one, it's like I've got 2. The practicality of like, okay, we're going to put all you motherfuckers really comes into play when it's like, okay, we've only got so much space.
Yeah. It's actually really funny. Well, just this is a personal experience of mine. I obviously being in the US and going to like various events, you come across practitioners who work in all types of traditions and spiritualities. And there was one time where I think, actually multiple times, where several like gods of other religions, approached me and basically tried to like, get me to, join them. And literally my own ancestral spirits were like, no, like don't even consider this. I'll name a place. This happened with Kali. Literally, like a statue of Kali just came to me. Like, it was just given to me. And then my answer is like, no, you need to give that to someone else. And then same thing with even some of the ATR gods. Like, I went into some of the hoodoo stuff that events I've gone to in the past. There are people who are ATR practitioners and their own gods and spirits approached me, and my spirits were like, no, this is not a situation where we're going to work together on.
I think, and maybe I'm just spitballing here, I think part of the reason that at least some heathens get taken up into ATR practices is because our own traditions are so jacked and needing some of the information and some of the relationships we hold. And ATR is a complete practice in and of itself. I am not saying that we are necessarily bringing anything to the table. I actually think that the white motherfuckers need some of that training and some of that experiences. That's been my experience with folks who are kind of dual tradition, is that there are spirits that want us for some reason or another. And what they bring back to heathenry in a lot of cases is direct experience of how to integrate this work. But it makes sense that, you're coming from a perspective which may not be completely intact, but your ancestor spirits are like, nah, we don't need this distraction. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Or rather, like, because this is a very Asian ancestral thing, but they're like, no other spirits should come like above or before us. And I think this is something that even Jen and I joked about. It's like, if any other spirits, if we start like prioritizing any other spirits above and before our own ancestral spirits, they're going to be the first ones to metaphorically take up the flip-flop and start spanking us.
It's not a one-to-one, but Othin very much supplies that particular perspective for me, because he's both an ancestor and a god. That resonates really hard for me. There's been several spirits who were like, come this way, and I had to get his permission first to follow for that reason, because like, whether it's a distraction or whether it's like, nah, we're not going to, your pathway is just not going to get along with that. And that makes a ton of sense that your ancestors would be like, I'm going to let you finish, but no. When that's happened, when spirit objects and such come to you, have you experienced? Because I've had moments where it's like, you're just caretaking this thing. You're caretaking this thing till it goes to somebody else. Like, it's not actually yours. Like, yeah, I know this person gifted it to you and said, put it to good use, but your good use is to hand it off to somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
No, it doesn't happen to me a lot anymore these days, probably because I'm not going to as many events as I used to. But but in the past, there would be things coming to me, and it's not something that I'm supposed to be working with. Even the first like totally that I came across was not one that I was supposed to work with. It came to me, but it was actually it had, from what I had found out, it belonged to another shaman who used in the past, and our spirits were not compatible, and it was not appropriate for me to use it. So I still don't know what to do with it, but it's like I wrapped in a black prayer scarf, and it's tucked away somewhere.
Got you.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I've had spirit objects come across my desk like that before, where it's like, yeah, you're not mine. I don't know what the fuck to do with you. And then, random person A or B will come along, and it's like, oh, yours now. Please get it out of my sight. It's not mine.
Bye. Thank you. Do not need this anymore.
Although I am of the opinion that sometimes some spirit objects come to us that they hope and want us to work with them, and we just can't.
Yep. Yeah. Emily says your spirits are smart, David, keeping your pool from getting too crowded. If you can't all share the sandbox, someone's going home. The ancestors will hardcore do that, especially if you're the only person or one of in the family line that they can come to. That also resonates with me pretty hard. There are certain ancestor spirits that, because of the spirits that I have been taken up by, won't talk with me. Certain Catholic ancestors have completely cut off contact. I'm currently a halfway house for many books and tools. There's a trunk in my living room full of stuff. Yeah. I think this is a pretty common experience for a lot of neo-pagans here in America. I'm grateful how spirit workers are able to connect today and pass things along where they need to be. Yeah, that honestly, like, I don't know about you, but for me, like, the internet has actually been a really big boon, because not only can we have conversations like this, but when stuff comes across my desk, if it's completely out of my wheelhouse, or if it's an object that I don't know what the hell to do with, I can go like, hey, does this look shiny for somebody else? Cool. Here you go. Sometimes you're just a mule.
Or Sarenth giving out wolf knuckles like candy at his own birthday party because they wanted.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So, to tell the story for full flavor, we're at Sarenth's birthday party at his house. Everyone was supposed to be giving him like presents, right? And Sarenth, comes up out of the basement just randomly and starts just handing people knuckle bones and is like, here, you need this. Here, you need this. And it's like, thank you, but what?
Yeah.
That's happened on at least 2 occasions.
2 occasions, more than once.
More than once.
I have a really, really special connection with wolf spirits in general, and sometimes I get stuff in and they're like, well, staying at your house was really nice, but we need to go now. And so that's, and not only because some of these folks are initiated into the pack tradition that Maleck started, but also because some folks are just wolf spirit aligned, and the wolves are like, yeah, we need to go with this person. So, the knuckle bones were like, it's time. Let's go.
No.
Yes, thank you for highlighting that. I was actually going to click on that.
So Reno, who I think you might know at least a little tangentially, David, said, regarding practicality, my Darkod teacher instructed me to use strips of cloth as representations. They are easy to pack up and move.
That's very true.
That makes a lot of sense, especially given the. So I don't know if this is a thing across all traditions, but like the Clutie cloth comes to mind from Scottish tradition. The tying of things in general, which is found in some Seidh work from heathen tradition, where the tying of the object and what you're tying it to and how can matter a great deal. Yeah. It's that makes a lot of sense from a practicality perspective, but also from these spirit objects, they're going to communicate with you, but they got to use them in these certain ways.
No, that's true. I definitely have it. Like, some of my scarves actually do represent specific ancestors or specific groups of ancestors or specific groups of spirits as well. So that definitely, actually does. That is very true.
Gotcha. Yeah. So some of the reason why I'm trying to speak in really big general terms is because I know there's some things that you can't talk about, and I'm trying really hard not to push on any of your taboos.
Yeah.
So if I'm speaking a little bit like broadly or general, it's because sometimes I'm feeling your spirits push back against questions I want to ask.
Oh, really? Because I was about to say, if there's anything that I can't answer, I will just straight up say I can't answer. But
your spirits are a little loud, and I appreciate that. It's one of those things where sometimes the taboos speak for themselves. Like when you start rubbing up against it, you kind of get this feeling of that's a no-go.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like, because, while your ancestors aren't here in my head with me, like, it's almost like they can hear the breath and feel it. And then it's just like, that's a question that's for another time when we're talking privately, but not here.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not for the public.
Yeah.
Like Emily says, editing down at the source level. Like, yeah, to a certain degree, yeah.
And that's something really interesting that I've found a lot too, is a lot of times my spirits will be like, you can talk about that with that person, but not here. This is too public. It's not that that's like secret information, it's just not public information. Almost like there's like 3 layers. Like, this is us only. This you can talk about in small groups, and this you can share publicly.
Like you were talking about, like there's certain things where it may not be an out and out secret, at least for your lineage, but like for some, it's like, you can't mention us because for us this is a secret, and that again, like a lot of your book, I was like nodding as I was reading through it, but also this conversation, a lot of it's like, okay, this resonates enough with me that I'm like, okay, we may not be like 1-to-1 on the same page all the time, but like enough stuff is speaking across that I can relate to it in a very deep way, and I appreciate that about you being so open and willing to share.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a dance that I definitely had to do with just writing things in the book. There's some things that, like, I'll be honest, there are some things that are secret, which in my head I'm like, why is that a secret? That's so obvious. Anyone with the brain can figure it out. Like why a certain thing is placed somewhere else. So I had to, like, I couldn't say it outright. I had to imply it.
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think to a certain degree, there's also this aspect of the mysteries keep themselves, because like you can write about it. Like I can talk all day, all night about what it's like to light a sacred fire, but until you've actually like sat down and done flint and steel, that's a whole other ball of wax. Like you can't get my experience of me bloodying my knuckles for 4 hours until I get a spark.
Right.
Maybe, I hope most of our watchers aren't going to have that experience and get a spark before 4 hours of making their knuckles bleed, but Kat actually has to go, so she wanted to ask a question for you. If we were looking for good sources on different land and sky spirits, where could we go if it's allowed?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say, I mean, outside of my book, for different, I would say if you want some of the Asian perspectives on like the different, land spirits, I would encourage reading up on actually dragons and nagas as they are described in Eastern traditions, because they are literal representations of certain types of land spirits. And then, but other than that, I would say it's really hard to find sources on sort of land spirits or sky spirits in a vacuum, because I feel like they're almost always described in a larger context, whether it's, whether it's, my book or Sarangarel's books or books on even Buddhism or Shinto. They all describe, like certain types of like land spirits or, like heavenly spirits within a context. It's rare that they're kind of described sort of in a vacuum or independently. So I know that was a little bit of a non-answer, but
Well, it also
Right.
Well, it also matters like what culture or context you're looking at, because your dragons and the mythological history and like, are you talking about a lung? Are you talking about something else? It matters, because like if you're talking about the usual Western dragon, there's certain baggage that comes with that, and there's certain mythological imperatives that come with that. So that makes total sense. Like, and when you're talking about sky spirits, are we talking about Tengur? Are we talking about storm spirits? Are we talking about what are we talking about? And that's again part of why your book is so fucking needed, because you're at least breaking down the subjective categories to where it's like, okay, we can at least point to this stuff and have a shared lexicon. And I think more than anything, like, part of the issue with a lot of neo-pagan circles is that when you're talking to random schmo in the street, what they're thinking of when they're thinking land spirit, they're not thinking land spirit like you and I are thinking. They're thinking gnome, like, because they're still in Paracelsus.
Yeah, I didn't know about nagas.
And them asking, saying I didn't know about nagas, like nagas, woof. like that's an entire branch because Nicholas talks a lot about Nagas on.
He talks a lot about them.
Yeah.
And like I didn't know there was this whole fucking world. Like, honestly, like the only exposure I've had to Nagas was as a thing you kill in Final Fantasy games. Like I didn't know there was this whole like thing behind them. I didn't know there were spirits you could interact with. I was just like, oh, that's the thing I kill for XP.
And it's also like important to also recognize that sometimes, like yes, they do come from certain perspectives or certain contexts, but even when different cultures refer to land spirits from other places, other cultures, like I have heard like Mongolian shamans say like, oh yeah, so like the Nagas that you guys have in America are, and I'm like, the Nagas that we have in America, like, so it's it becomes like a translation thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. So like one of the things, like one of the spirits that you don't really want to work with unless you know what you're doing is like the water panther here in Michigan. They're fucking dangerous. They are utterly fucking dangerous. And it's not like the water horse, whose name I can't remember, from Celtic mythology, but they're pretty dangerous. The Nika.
There's a couple different names depending on which source culture specifically.
I ain't invoking it, so I'm not that pressed about it. Yeah. But like, there's certain water spirits here that you only interact with unless you're at a certain level and you've got a certain relationship with spirits. And like, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's certain spirits, like for instance with the Nagas and the dragons, like unless you're like here with the spirits, you shouldn't even really be fucking talking to them because they'll fucking eat your feet if you're the average person. But you have to like be recommended almost in a certain way by other spirits to have this good relationship. And I know this might be tapping on taboo area, but to a certain degree, is there this thing of like, I can't work with these spirits unless I am first referred to by this particular, I don't know, master spirit or particular being, if you will. Is that a thing in your exploration?
Yes and no. And the reason why I say that is because at the end of the day, it's kind of temperamental in that, like as a precaution, we almost say like any spirit that you approach in a very humble way, almost like minimizing yourself in a way. Like literally in some of the prayers of, the Amur tribes of Southeast Siberia, they will literally say like, oh, like please forgive me for being stupid because I'm a stupid person and I just want to, come with a gift, but I'm sorry if I did anything stupid, like to that effect. We almost say like as like a general precaution, that's the attitude you take with any and every spirit that you are not familiar with, and come with a gift of some kind, like an offering of some kind, and was generally recommended for any land spirits, any type of land spirits, is to come bearing things that look like treasures, like shiny things, because that will be universally recognized, and that's almost like an expression of goodwill. But in terms of like certain types of spirits, definitely like there are some spirits who just don't want to be worked with or will only work with a select few, and it might take a recommendation from another spirit to be able to even facilitate any type of that level of communication. But usually what will happen is what I've observed happen most of the time is the spirit that you have a relationship with, they'll be like, hey, don't worry about it. I'm going to go and try to work things out. You stay put. I'll come back and let you know.
God, that's nice.
But I mean, that's the relationship that, I mean, like, that's the bond that you have to build with your own spirits, that they then get to do that for you.
Right. That is, have to say that is something that definitely comes across in your book and in this conversation, previous conversations, that relationship really is the essence, if not the quintessence of what it is to be a shaman, to be a spiritual person in this cultural context, is the relationships that you grow and maintain. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things that really kind of like, among them a great many, because I was nodding my head through most of this book, but one of the things that you kept emphasizing was that these relationships actually need to be maintained, and that you suffer if you don't maintain them. And so it's one of the things that keeps coming through, both in the conversation we've been having for the last, hour 40, hour 30. But it's also something that really comes through hardcore in your book, is like the relationships not only matter, they're intrinsic to doing the work, right?
Mm-hmm. No, I speak from personal experience when many years ago, when I was actually when I was living in Hong Kong for a couple of years, when I just moved there, I didn't have this awareness. I tried to do spiritual work without engaging with the local land spirits there yet, and it is no wonder that I had skin problems of all sorts pop up. I had like allergy problems, like dermatological problems, financial problems that came up, and it was because I was trying to do, I was attempting to do spiritual work, but I basically had not made an effort to engage with the land spirits there yet.
Gotcha. So you had to have those established before you could even do the baseline shit you needed to do.
Well, because a lot of the stuff that I want to do, I'm of the opinion that any type of spiritual work is going to pass through the land spirits in some form or fashion. And if we don't engage, depending on what the temperament of those land spirits is if we don't engage with them, maybe nothing happens. Maybe what we try to do is weak, or maybe the spirits will be offended, going like, "You are a spiritual worker. You should know better."
Yeah. I found that, especially that last part, I found to be really true, is if you don't know better, sometimes with some spirits, sometimes you get more of a pass. But if you're a spirit worker, no, you should fucking know better. You don't get the pass that everyone else might.
Especially if you're claiming the title, sometimes it's I don't know if you found this, but for some folks who will claim a title before they've got the experience for it, the spirits will just fuck with them.
Oh, all the time.
Just all to see, okay, do you know your shit or not? No, nothing's gonna work, asshole.
I mean that putting yourself on as a title essentially makes you one of those I'm having a blank on that building that's on the edge of shores with a big light. The lighthouse, yes. Yeah. Basically, it makes you a lighthouse, and so you're basically calling for attention, and you're gonna get the attention. What you're gonna do then?
Oh man, if you don't know what you're doing, they're gonna run roughshod over you.
Yeah, and especially for a title like shaman, or any of the synonyms of shaman in those languages, that's an intrinsically sacred word. So
right,
you start using it, you better be prepared for what might happen.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Maleck. I thought you had some. Okay,
no, you're fine.
I found it really interesting how much possession work is used before spirit travel and shamanism, understandably so. What I find really interesting is, at least for heathen spirit workers, it tends to be the complete flip.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, we will be much more happy to get out of our body than bring something else in.
And I think part of the reason why is because there isn't that and this is genuinely just me spitballing, but this is, I think, at least part of the reason why, is that there isn't that ancestral lineage is not really the spirits that you're necessarily working with in heathenry, right? So the spirits that you would be inviting in, you don't necessarily know all that well.
Also, it's a bigger risk.
Yeah.
They're gods a lot of times.
Yeah, a lot of times it's gods, or you hope it's gods.
But we don't have the ancestral lineage, so some folks don't have the discernment available to figure out if that's a god or a spirit hijacking the god space.
Yeah. So the risk is increased because it's harder to discern exactly who the spirit is and what their intentions are, and the relationship doesn't go back generations. It may only go back a few months. Hopefully, if you know what you're doing, it's more than that. I've seen some really wild stories online, and by stories I mean I had to yell at some people online. It's fine.
This actually plays into something else that Emily was talking about. Everyone should at least make an effort with their local spirits before engaging in other spirit work, in my opinion. I heartily agree.
Yes.
If for no other reason than you fucking live on the land, you should know it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even if you're living in an apartment.
I
Especially if you are. Sorry, go ahead.
Anyways, I wasn't even allowed to move to my current home until the river spirit that I was living close with made introductions for me to the river spirit I live close to now. They had to literally, they were like, she strictly forbid me from moving until she could work with me to make the introductions and make sure that I was moving to a place that would welcome me and, you know, that I could work well with.
And Emily makes the point, it's like trying to run through a brick wall versus asking someone in the room to direct you to the door. And being prepared for the responsibilities and the work that come your way if you start using those titles.
Yeah.
And to the point that I was making earlier, any non-human spirits are probably going to have a harder time in the body. Well, I would agree with that, because there have been times where I can bring in ancestors and I am much less drained than if I'm bringing in a god. And I don't know if this has been part of your own experience or your experience with elders or what have you, but the more human aspect makes things a bit easier in terms of getting shit done.
Yeah.
Whereas the non-human stuff requires, at the very least, some translation between the meat suit and the spirit bodies. Because there's aspects, like, I'm going to use my own experiences with Othin, for instance. There are aspects of Othin that are very close to human, and then there are aspects of him that are very not. And the ones that are not tend to be a lot more draining and a lot more, I guess, rough. Because while the work is necessary, it's not as compatible with the meat suit interaction. And there's a lot more work that has to be done. Whereas it makes sense that with shamans in the traditional North Asian cultures, because these are ancestor spirits, there's an easier time of bringing them in because they're family, right?
Yeah.
In a very real sense.
I mean, everything you said, it pretty much, that concept does apply, because as well, there are cases, actually, depending on the tribe, there are varying cases of either very little or a lot, where people, among their retinue of shamanic spirits, there might actually be a land spirit there too, because the land spirit was bonded to the bloodline. And so that land spirit might even appear as a shamanic spirit. And when that land spirit comes in, it does take a bigger toll on the body. It in a way, the shaman becomes like more powerful but more vulnerable at the same time.
Yeah.
They're able to do more work, but there's less of an understanding of the human needs. And actually, and even there are, it's not, I almost want to say like mythological, but it's not mythological, because we have specific cases where there are some shamans that have spirits that are extremely powerful entities, is how I'll describe them. And it takes a toll on the body to the extent that that working with them actually shortens the shaman's life.
Yep.
So,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I am allowed to share this. It is something that the land spirits shared with me. We had a major ice storm roll through around February, March, and it brought down several trees. And one of them came down right in front of our land spirit shrine. And part of my work was the land spirits, because this is our permanent home and other reasons, they wanted me to permanently bond with the land. So they asked me to drink some of the sap from one of the fallen trees. And it was dripping down in such a way that you could put yourself underneath it and then catch the sap as it was coming out of the broken limb. It no longer produces sap. And that for me was like the land spirit saying, okay, this is not only real, this is like we're bonded now. Like you've drunk our blood.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that resonates, and I don't know if you can speak to that, even if it does resonate. But at least for my experience, I get why those bonds can be in a very real visceral way that I didn't experience previous, because I have cultists with the river spirits and with the various land spirits around me, but until that point I had never bonded with a land spirit like that. And so I really get how that can be incredibly empowering but also incredibly vulnerable, because the health of the land and you are definitely tied now.
And to the extent that the essentially your not only just you, but actually your bloodline becomes attached to the land as well. So oftentimes, if that land, goes through trauma, or the condition the land suffers, the family condition will be affected as well. And it happens to the extent that actually, especially among the Tungusic peoples, a lot of the land shrines are actually in the form of certain specific trees and sacred trees that almost serve as the shrine to the land spirits. And there has actually even historically been situations where when Russian settlers and loggers went into Siberia and they started to, log and cut down trees randomly, which included some of those sacred trees, it actually deeply affected the health of a lot of the families that were actually bonded to those specific land spirits, to the point where families had to even move their home so that the tree would be on their property, so that it wouldn't be chopped down, which is something that they're not supposed to do, but what can you do?
Right. That makes so much sense. Thank you for that piece. That makes oh shit. That makes so much sense.
But that being said, anything, if something does happen to the land and the land spirit gets riled up, that also affects in many ways your own wrathful abilities as well, because land spirits have, especially certain types of land spirits, have access to a wrath that is beyond human comprehension.
Yes.
And and that can translate to very powerful and very risky work.
Yes. It's something that go ahead.
That was one thing that I really appreciated that you didn't shy away from in the book, was and you emphasize this with both like the white and black shamanism, is that like, no, just because you're cursing someone, that's not a bad thing. It just is. Like, some of these spirits are just like that.
Yeah. It's like curses. They're the funny thing is, even though they do believe in the concept of karmic debt with curses, sometimes the curses happen because the spirits just want it to happen, and like, it happens. It's
you fucked around, you found out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that, honestly, like to certain degrees, like, and I don't subscribe to a karmic system, and unfortunately the idea of karma is much abused here. But I can also see how sometimes the curse is the karma, or the curse is a vehicle for that particular thing working itself out. In heathen tradition, we have what's called skuld or shield, which usually translates to debt.
Actually, that's how we see karma. We see karma as like debt and credit, and whether you built a surplus or you've put yourself in debt. That's actually how we see karma.
Yeah,
that's hilarious, and it comports really well with the concept of odolog and Haminga and skuld. That that makes a lot of sense. Humming for us is the luck that you build as well as inherit from your ancestors and community. And schooled is like the debt that you incur or that you have to pay off. Whereas Orlog means it translates to old law. It's the threads of fate or weird or earth herb that were laid down before you were born. And that's why you're doing what you're doing in this lifetime. And that, all of that really, it resonates in a way that it may not be in the same tune, but it's in the same register, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's why like I tell people, because people think karma is, or people think this karma is like you do something happens back, and I'm just there going, no, not necessarily. That just what it means is you've incurred a debt, and you might not be paying the debt anytime soon, but it's going to be paid at some point.
This lifetime, next lifetime, at some point, it will get paid.
Yeah, the ledgers will balance at some point.
Well, we've been on this for almost 2 hours. Is there anything that you want to leave your readers with? Is there anything that you would like to plug? Your pluggables? Obviously, go buy David's book because it's amazing.
100%.
But is there anything that you would like to talk about in terms of upcoming projects or things that you're going to be speaking at, any conventions, anything like that?
And
it's okay if the answer is no.
Yeah, I mean, for now, the answer is not really anything coming up. I mean, it's, I'll be honest. The book was my biggest project for a long time, and it's out already.
Right.
And right now, it's basically like appearances on shows like this or at bookstores. Like when they come up. It's kind of sporadic. Feel free for people feel free to follow my Instagram. I do try to post, like weekly content, just showing, some like bits of, relevant shamanic material like here or there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think just from a personal thing, I am in less than 2 weeks, I am going to be taking a relatively long trip to Mongolia. For over half a month, so that's probably, if nothing else, that's just me getting away and recharging a bit before coming back. But that's just a personal thing. But basically, I constantly have requests for appearances at on podcasts, on shows, at events. So as they happen, I'll post them on social media.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit and have a couple of drinks with us and stuff. That was
yeah.
No, thank you for having me. I mean, after AGF, I knew I had nothing to worry about here, so I can just almost relax a bit.
I'm so happy to hear that. If you'd like, we usually have an after party where we just kind of sit around. Anybody who wants to drink can knock back a couple, but we just talk and talk in the Discord chat, so we can throw that link to you if you're interested. And for anybody else that wants to join us in the Discord, by all means, follow us. I've posted your Instagram account in the chat, so folks can find that in the live chat. This has been phenomenal. I'd love to have you back on at any time you want. This has been amazing.
Thank you very much. Yeah. No, this was really fun. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad.
Oh, absolutely. I just want to express thanks to you and to your spirits and all the people that have supported you to this point. This, I hope, proves as useful an episode to others as it was to me, and connective and useful and good. And I appreciate all the work you've done to get here and to all the literal years of work it took for you to build that book. It is no small stretch of work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's as I mentioned, I was hesitant about putting together, but for better or for worse, it's out, and I'm happy that people they find it interesting, they find it enjoyable.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to wrap the episode here, and we will see those of you who can join us. Great. We'll see you in the Discord. David, if you can join us, I'm going to throw you the Discord link. If you can't, that's also understandable. Thank you so much for your time tonight. This has been
Seriously.
absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you,
y'all.
and
We will catch you in the after party, or we will catch you next time. Thank you very much.
best of well, folks.